Welcome to the show, Jake. Jared, what did I say, Jake?
Yeah, that's okay. So you're JD. You
Yeah.
go by JD? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. I now. How much clean time do you have?
I have 5 years.
5 years. So
Yeah.
what's your sober date?
August 10th, 2018.
So what was going on August 9th, 2018?
Well, I'll tell you what happened on August 9th. I went to Skid Row. I bought some heroin. I shot some heroin in a stairwell of like a parking garage on Skid Row. I had recently just gotten out of the hospital because I had blacked out and woken up missing one of my toes. And actually had a girlfriend, and she.
You wait. You skipped over that like
Yeah.
really nonchalantly, like
Yes.
everyone blacks out and wakes up missing a toe.
Yeah. Well, I was sober for probably like 6 months, then relapsed for one day and woke up missing my toe. And I don't really know what happened. I like to mix like heroin and cocaine and meth kind of at the same time. And I usually at the end, it was like I was blacking out a lot. So I just woke up and I had nail clippers. I was like clipping my nails and I blacked out and I just kept going. And I wasn't actually missing my toe. I was missing the bone in my toe. So the hospital had to cut my toe off.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
So you're on Skid Row. You're 9 toes deep. And you're in a stairwell. Like, what happened?
Well, I actually had a girlfriend at the time that I met at a rehab or like a sober living thing, and she was kind of like, she's a good person and everything, but her mom like paid her rent, and she just didn't really have to like worry about anything, and kept relapsing, and she moved me in when I got kicked out of my sober living, and she sort of nursed me during the whole toe episode. It took like 2 months, and I was still getting high, and but at the very end, I wound up in that stairwell, and I got high, and then I went back to her place, and her mom was in town to sort of rescue her and take her to Seattle, get her out of town.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, you're fucked now. Like, you have nowhere to stay. We'll drop you off at this rehab, this like nonprofit rehab place that I actually met her at. And it's a long shot, but they might take you back. So they dropped me off that afternoon after I got high, and they actually, they actually took me. And that was August 9th. And then, August 10th, I woke up and I was sober.
Now, that wasn't your first rehab because you met the girl in rehab. So, like, what made it click this time?
Well, I'd been to that rehab once before, and I thought it, I really thought it was going to click that time, because I got out of jail, and I really like, I just hit like a crazy bottom of just homelessness and Skid Row and all that, and was really fortunate to get into this nonprofit long-term rehab. And I thought it clicked. I kind of like took it, I took it pretty seriously, but I didn't really do the steps, and I just kind of went to meetings and was like trying to make friends and stuff. And I thought that was like taking it seriously. And this time I think it was losing the toe, because I realized that, the time prior I had actually lost part of my face. I had woken up in a bathtub on outside of Skid Row in Chinatown. I'd like broken into it wasn't really like an apartment. It was more of like a boarding house with shared bathrooms at the end of the hallway. So I woke up in one of those hallways in a bathtub, and I was like, missing part of my face. I had to get all this reconstructive surgery, and then the next time I got high, I lost my toe. So I realized like I'm 2 for 2 basically of losing, like waking up in crazy situations where I've like destroyed myself and lost a body part.
Now, do you know about the face? What happened there?
Yeah, I was sober for probably like 4 or 5 months in Florida, where my dad got sober. So I was at sober living with my dad, and then saved up some money, flew to California, moved in with some sober friends that had like years of sobriety, and did well for like 3 days, and then hit up one of my old friends that I used to actually sleep on Skid Row with, who had kind of moved up in the world and started like working for the cartel and had like a little apartment and everything. And I thought, okay, I'll go. He said, listen, I only smoke heroin now. I don't shoot it, and I don't do meth. It's like the perfect equation to responsibly use drugs. And I said, okay, I'll try that.
Reduction, right?
Yeah, harm reduction. Yeah. And so I went over, we smoked some heroin. His wife left. We started shooting heroin and shooting meth and shooting cocaine. And he was like giving me a tattoo, and I just blacked out. And I just woke up like down the street the next morning in this bathtub. And I get like, gotten into some kind of fight. I got sliced in my face and in my lip right here. My lip is fake, actually. But so I got sliced. I don't remember it. I break into this like boarding house to wash up. I end up in the bathtub. I end up like chewing on my wound a lot and like getting it all infected and just terrible. And they actually had to like remove my lip and then rebuild my lip. It's not very noticeable on Skype, but in person you can see that I have a scar on my face. Fortunately, it was free. I ended up at a hospital in downtown Los Angeles where there was a plastic surgery training department, and they basically said, we've never seen anyone this crazy do something like this, but we'll work on it for free but it's going to be like students. And I said, of course, please.
Yeah, for the students, I would love to.
Well, I was like, oh, I'm just going to kill myself. Like, this is, I'm missing. I couldn't like pronounce consonants because I was missing my bottom lip.
Yeah.
And, it was like, this ain't a life worth living. And then I got this like a crazy blessing that like this. I ended up at one of like 3 or 4 known hospitals in America with these with a solid training department. And they did it, and then I basically got high one more time and lost my toe and thought, you know what, next time it's like going to be my hand or my arm or my dick or just something that like I don't want to lose.
Yeah. Like Requiem for a Dream. I mean, he lost half of his arm.
Yeah.
Like that's a crazy scene that I always think of, is them having like, that's such one of those movies that every drug addict has watched, but like never learned any lessons from. Like,
yeah. Well, it seemed, like very powerful movie. I saw it in 2001. My parents were heroin addicts, so I was like living in my house. We had a black box where we got like all the pay-per-view channels, so that I'd watch it like 20 times. And I kind of knew my parents were on heroin, and I'd watch that movie, and so that movie really sticks with me. But once I started doing heroin, I kind of thought, oh, that movie's bullshit. Like, no, I've never met someone that lost an arm. But now people are like losing chunks of flesh and shit. I mean, it's like with this dilatil stuff or whatever it's called.
I'm like afraid to relapse with this shit around now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm afraid to relapse.
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, I don't like fentanyl. I've done fentanyl. I've overdosed. I've died from fentanyl. I don't enjoy it. It's not as euphoric for me. So that's definitely helps in my battle against relapsing. But also, it seems like a death sentence.
Yeah. Now, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Boston until I was 12. I grew up with my parents were heroin addicts and crackheads, and they held it together pretty good until I was about 12. In which case, they were arrested, and I was adopted by my aunt in Oakland, California. So I moved from Boston to Oakland, California.
That's quite the jump. How'd that affect you at 12 years old? Because you're just like leaving everything you know, and like you're conscious enough that you are aware, you have friends, you've made friends, and then all of a sudden you're across the country with an aunt you've probably never seen that much, considering she lived across the country.
Yeah, I didn't know her that well. I mean, I grew up in Boston. I grew up in kind of like a working class area. My dad was a union carpenter, and I grew up. There was poor kids, there was kids with some money, but it was like a pretty working class in my neighborhood. And I had friends, but I was like the kid of a crackhead, so I hung out with like the other kids of junkies and fucked up parents, and then I loved it as a 12-year-old. But when I moved to Oakland, my aunt has some money. I mean, she's not wealthy, but she lived in like a pretty nice part of Oakland in the hills, and it was a very big change to be around kids that like their dads had never like used a drill, or like everyone had like organic food and like maids and stuff, and like it was just a real. But listen, everyone was really nice to me. I made some friends, and I had a very good upbringing with my aunt.
That's good. So when did you drink first or use first?
I drank. My aunt was great, but I was like a real shithead, and still, listen, I was very depressed about losing. I didn't have my parents anymore, and my mom actually died when I was 14 from heroin. So at about 15, I discovered alcohol, and you know, a lot of my friends did, but I was like kind of different in that I was like willing to drink at any time. Like a lot of people like in high school, like they'll drink on a Friday or a Saturday if there's like a house to drink at with like a party. But
Yeah.
me, I like magnetized towards kids that were like, hey, let's take the bus, let's skip class on a Tuesday and take the bus to the liquor store that sells alcohol to kids and just like drink anytime. So I really like medically used it right away.
I feel like everyone knows where those liquor stores are when you're a kid. You know what I mean? Like, I started drinking at 11. So, like, by the time I was 13, 14, we were asking the homeless people to go buy us beer and then have them buy themselves a six pack. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
then there was the one that you knew took fake IDs when you're like 16, 17, 18, you know, the ones
Yeah.
you can go to and drive to. So, no, I get that where you knew the ones. Now, what brought you down to LA?
You know, I drank pretty heavily in high school, but I did okay. Like I got okay grades. I got into UC Santa Cruz. It's a college. I went to college. UC Santa Cruz is like 2 hours south of San Francisco, so it's not quite LA, but it's a very drug heavy school. And this was kind of like, this was 2007, 2008, when heroin really started making like a big push because I guess they started cracking down on like the oxys. So there was like a vacuum and the cartel saw an opportunity. But I got started with oxys in college. But
Same.
you know, I wouldn't touch heroin because my parents are heroin addicts, but these
Yeah.
like pills started, I didn't know what an oxycontin was. So I started doing those and, you know, like very quickly you realize that it's but heroin is cheaper and you just start doing the heroin and things get like, you know, terrible over the span of like 2 or 3 years. And I ended up dropping out.
You dropped out.
Yeah, I dropped out. And then I had an uncle in Los Angeles who was my mother's brother who like was very familiar with heroin addiction since my mom was a heroin addict. And he was like, I'll give you one chance. Like, I'll buy you a Greyhound ticket down here. You have health insurance through your school. We'll get you into a rehab. If you fuck up, you know, I'm never talking to you again. And I did it. I took the Greyhound down to LA. They got me into a rehab. This was 2011. And just like immediately started getting high and fucking up. And, you know, obviously, you know, I got kicked out of that rehab and with nowhere to go, someone just told me, you know, you go downtown to Skid Row. I'd already been buying heroin on Skid Row. So I just kind of went there at 22 years old. Yeah.
That's quite the jump from like living in college and partying to within 2 years, now you're homeless on Skid Row.
Yeah. And like, listen, I'm not like a big guy. I'm not like a tough guy. I grew up in like a pretty nice area of Oakland. I didn't have a lot of experience with
You're
this
not
kind of
getting into fights.
No, I didn't get into like a lot of fights growing up. And so, and I was 20, you know, I'm 34 now and I look 26. So you can imagine what I looked like when I was 22. Um, it's crazy. I don't know. And listen, a lot of people go to Skid Row and like their first day, they get like the shit kicked out of them and get mugged and they never go back. And like, I definitely experienced a lot of violence down there, but I think I just have like a demeanor where I'm pretty nice and I'm like pretty aware of my surroundings. And I was pretty good at avoiding heavy confrontation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's it like a typical day on Skid Row?
Well, it's really hard to be alone. So like right away, I realized I can't be alone. I got to like jump in with some people, and it's pretty racially segregated, and not a lot of white guys down there, and especially like clean cut college white dudes.
Years old.
Yeah,
You're like straight off the bus, fresh 22-year-old. Like
yeah,
you hadn't been there long, and you're finding Skid Row. I mean,
yeah. But you know what I did was I found like a crew of Mexican guys, and you know of course they were like very skeptical of me, but I like went to this. I stole a bunch of stuff. I stole a bunch of like socks and like toiletries, and basically gave them like an offering. I was like, hey, I'm useful. Like I can get into the store. I can steal anything. You guys have like face tattoos and shit, so you probably can't. I'm of some value, and that's sort of how it started. And so they brought me into their crew. So you know you have like your little spot where we had like 4 tents for like 6 guys, and I don't know. I was doing a lot of meth back then, so I was staying up for like 3 or 4 days and then like crashing for 24 hours. So it's not really like you wake up. It's more like, 3 days on, 1 day off. And I don't know. I had a great time. My body could handle it. My body could handle sleeping on the cement. I loved it. I was just doing meth and heroin and running around and stealing stuff. And,
I was gonna say, how do you afford your habit every day if you're just like living on Skid Row, not working?
well, in 2011, this is how I made money. There's a train station called Union Station, and I'd go there every day, and I'd ask people for money. I'd just say, hey, I'm a kid. I'd pretend to be like a high school kid that ran away and say like, hey, I got to get back to Oakland. The ticket is, it's $70 for Amtrak ticket or whatever. Anything you can do will help. A lot of people would just give me like $1, but some people give me $20. Basically every time I got up to like $20, I'd leave. I'd go get high. I'd go back, and I'd go back 5, 6 times a day and just make 20, $30, and it worked.
Hear that, kids? If you want,
Yeah,
you need some money down Skid Row, go to Union Station.
it works if you're like clean cut. Now I get into fights and get the shit kicked out of me and like be fucked up looking, and it would be more difficult. But I could go down there and be like, I got mugged. Like I'm a college kid that got mugged. I lost my wallet. They stole it. That works. Yeah,
Hear that if you need a backup plan.
Yeah. And then I also stole stuff and stole bikes, stole a lot of bikes. Obviously I'm not proud of that, but it is what I did.
Yeah.
But I had a good stream of income.
Now, how long did that last if you were having fun and having like fun doing all that? No, you weren't having fun, but part of you enjoyed what you were doing and didn't have to really like work in a day. So what was the final, like the first time where you're like, what the hell am I doing? Like how long did that take?
Yeah, I'd say I was down there that time for probably like 6 months, and your feet start getting really fucked up because of the meth, and then like the not showering and not changing your socks that often, and like so my feet got really fucked up, and I needed a bike, so I bought a bike from like a crackhead guy for like $8. So the bike is like your lifeblood. I couldn't function without a bike, and I came upon this like parked car of this passed out drunk kid, and I saw that he like had a phone, and this was like 2011, 2012. Like he had an iPhone, and an iPhone's worth a lot of money back then. And so I like dropped my bike. I got into his car to steal his iPhone, and then these like two other guys got into the back seat of the car, and they were like, "What are you doing? You're gonna try to rob this kid?" And I was like, no, of course not. I'm trying to help this kid, and they were like homeless drug addicts too, so they were like, well, we're gonna help him. Like we basically spotted this mark first.
Yeah.
So like, get the fuck out of here. And I was like, well, how about I help him with his phone and you can help him with his car? I was like saying like, basically, I'm going to steal his phone. You guys can steal his car.
Yeah.
And, they didn't, before they answered, I just grabbed the phone and I ran away. But while I did that, someone stole my bike. So I had an iPhone. I sold it for like $200, iPhone 4. And, that lasted a day or two.
$200 for an iPhone 4 in 2011?
Yeah. Because it was like right when the iPhone 4 dropped.
Oh, okay. So that was a brand new phone you were getting.
Phone. It was probably like $800. I don't know. You could sell it to the
shops always give you half.
Yeah.
That's like the rule, kids. If you want to steal and go to a pawn shop, they're only going to give you half the value, and they're going to actually barely give that.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, look up how much it's selling on eBay and maybe give you half.
Yeah, maybe. That's like tops. You're going to max out half.
Yeah. So this was like an $800 phone, and like the Paises, which is like a term for Mexican-born Mexican. They have big fencing operations down there. Maybe linked to the cartel. I'm not sure, but they gave me $200, and I got high for like 2 days. Ran out of money. Feet were like lasagna, like couldn't walk, and that was like kind of like my first bottom, where it's like I don't have a bike, I don't have any money, I can't hustle up money because I can't walk to Union Station. And I just kind of like found a rug and like rolled myself up and kicked heroin. I kicked for like 2 or 3 days, and then I unrolled myself, walked over to like this mission, this Fred Jordan mission, where they give out Coca-Cola for lunchtime. Still kicking bad, you know. It's like it only been like 2 or 3 days, and this guy was like driving by giving out like blankets and shit, and we talked for a while. He offered to take me home and let me detox at his house.
Oh shit, you got really lucky.
Yeah, well, I was like, this guy might rape me. I don't know what the hell this guy's gonna do, but he was like a religious guy, and I just got this feeling like, okay, this guy's not gonna like take advantage of me. And he took me to his house. He fed me, and I kicked for like a week or two. And then he was like, what's the plan? You know, I can take you to the Salvation Army. And I was like, no, I want to make some phone calls to high school friends and see if I can move up to Oakland. And he's like, I highly suggest Salvation Army. But he couldn't force me. And I was like, just too dumb. And I ended up going up to Oakland and living with a friend for like, on and off for like a year, but pretty much spending most of my time in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, getting high and sleeping outside.
So that didn't work then. Like, how long? I mean, because now you go back to Oakland, and you're living with a friend of yours, but how long does it take? Like, what's the breaking point to where like, all right, I'm gonna go do heroin again?
I'd say like I moved in and he was like, you got to get a job. So I was like, in my head, I'm like, well, how am I going to get a job without meth? Like, I'm going to need meth to like have the energy to get a job. And I actually had this system for about a year where I only did heroin every 3 days. And I just did meth every day. And I never got strung out. It did work, except I got very strung out on meth, which was worse. It really was. It was worse.
Was it the psychosis?
Yeah, it was just like the insane, like, thought patterns and hearing voices, and I'd go to the hospital all the time for staph infections, and then you see when you're doing heroin, like, you know, like people that do heroin are just junkies. Like they're not gonna like skin you alive and like think that you're part of the Illuminati, like, you know, but meth heads will.
Yeah.
You know, so like you start like hanging out with different people, and then I'm in San Francisco, so obviously there's like a huge presence of like predatory, like weird sex stuff going on. It's like I had to like escape, you know, multiple times to like avoid getting like raped, and just getting these, you like end up in a hotel room and you're like, there's like more people in this hotel room than I thought. And it just got crazy dark, and like fortunately nothing happened, but I saw that side of meth, you know.
And because the homelessness is not any better in San Francisco than it is in LA, right?
No, back then it was like, I mean, Skid Row definitely had more numbers. Tenderloin was more like wacky and kind of like scary, and there's like more services in San Francisco. So there's a lot of like half homeless people, like people that like get free housing, but they're basically homeless and they like do drugs. So it's a little different, but
there's more support in the neighborhood for people that are homeless. Like you can get meals easier or something like that. Like,
I wouldn't say food is plentiful on Skid Row. It's more like the housing. So there's like a lot of housing, and to be honest, I don't think it helps really. Like it's just basically giving junkies housing, which it'd be cool if they like gave them treatment. I don't know. I think that would probably be better, but
yeah.
But some of them like are inside. But you know, when you're on drugs, you want to be like outside and like doing crimes and stuff. And so there's like a lot of people outside, and it's just a wacky, way wackier, and that time I was just stealing stuff. So I was just you know, breaking into garages and shit and like stealing tools.
Yeah, because tools definitely pay well too at pawn shops.
Yeah, I was actually utilizing Craigslist a lot. So I was like selling a lot of I was finding shit in the garbage and fixing it, and then like selling it on Craigslist, or like stealing stuff from wherever. And so I utilized Craigslist a lot. I didn't have an ID, so I the whole time, so I couldn't use a pawn shop.
But how did you never have an ID? Did you never have a driver's license, or was it expired?
No, I had an ID, but I got like in this hotel room where these like ladies held me hostage for like 12 hours, and like they thought I stole their cell phone, and there was like this, it was this whole thing where like they put me in a suitcase and like we're gonna kill me, and
Wait. I want to hear about that though.
Well, I had like a drug dealer, and he went to jail. So like his girlfriends took over his business, but she was crazy. And at some point, her phone got stolen, and her uncle ended up with the phone, and her uncle stole all of her customers. So I started buying from her uncle because her uncle answered her phone and said, now I'm selling the drugs, and I didn't ask any questions. And then like 2 weeks later, she got into contact with me on that same number. She had like canceled the phone, got a new phone, and invited me over. And I went over, and they basically thought that I was the person that had stolen the phone and sold it to the uncle. So they beat the fuck out of me. Listen, I'm not embarrassed. Two like women that were, pretty scary and with knives, like beat the shit out of me. And then they made me get naked, and they put me in a suitcase. And then they invited these two guys over. One of them's name was Cousin Meth. At least that's what he went by. And they were like trying to sell me to a human trafficker. So I was like naked, and they were like taking pictures of me and telling me to smile and, look sexy and all that. But they ended up like not being able to. No one was really taking me. So then they were like, "We're just gonna kill
You
him."
weren't appealable. You weren't like appealable enough for someone to traffic you.
No, I was like not. I don't know, so or whatever. I don't know who was trying to buy me, but they were not interested.
A 24-year-old drug addict.
Yeah. Well, in San Francisco, that's worth something. But
Yeah.
But anyway, so the drug dealer that was my drug dealer that was in jail called his girlfriend while this was all happening, and he was in jail. He was probably not on a ton of meth and was sound of mind, and he called from like a snuck-in cell phone or whatever, and basically convinced them to let me go. And then I talked to him on the phone, and I was like, you got to convince them to let me go. This is not going to go good. And they let me go, but they said, hey, we're keeping. I had already lost my ID, but I had a passport, and they were like, we're keeping your passport and all your shit as like collateral for you to not go to the police. And then after some time, we'll give it back if you like keep your word about not going to the police. But I just never saw them again. I just said I don't want to see them. So they kept my passport. So that's how I lost my ID.
This podcast is also sponsored by BetterHelp. If you are looking for therapy and not able to get something right away locally, you can do that with them. Within 48 hours, you can find a therapist to get on telehealth with you. I mean, I haven't heard anything but great things from people that have already done it, that watch my show or listen to my show. If you're looking to get 10% off your first month, you can go to betterhelp.com/MJSPNPMCA. That is betterhelp.com/MJSPNPMCA.
That is the most fucked up way to lose your ID I've ever heard. Like, people.
I mean, it made a great story. It was the scariest moment of my life. But I had faith. I knew that like I'd probably get out of this.
And you had that relationship with your drug dealer where he would be able to talk you out of getting like in trouble with somebody. Like, I had that with my drug dealer where like when I decided I'm going to go to rehab, I called him and I owed him like $1,800. Like, because he would always front me, and I would always find people to buy. Then I would charge an extra $5. You know what I mean? Because I never did heroin actually. I was on pills for a decade. Like, I made sure I had enough money every day for pills. Yeah. And like even if it was just enough to just get by through the day, then so be it. I called him up and I'm like, hey man, like I think I'm gonna go to rehab. And he knows me by now. For like 2 years he's been selling to me almost daily. He was like, listen, you go to rehab and you stay clean, you don't owe me a dime. But if you go to rehab and I hear you're back and trying to buy shit, you owe me that $1,800 still. So he did me the biggest favor, like, and he made a ton of money because of me. Yeah. So like I got him connected with other people that they could sell for him. Like he wasn't worried, like he was making his money back with me. I think that's why he didn't, like, not that he didn't care, but I think that's why he actually did care, because your drug dealer is someone you text with. Like I would be like texting him like, you watching this Flyers game? You know what I mean? Like that kind of like relationship that you sometimes build with your dealer. So now you almost get trafficked. What clicks this time to where, how long did that go on before you're like, I got to get some kind of help?
Well, I think, probably for like another, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, I'm like fucking around and just getting high, living in the Tenderloin. And what happens? I guess, I just kind of hit a bottom where like I'm out of money, my feet are fucked up.
Again,
I have a cell phone, but I trade it for like $20, get high, have nothing, no cell phone, no money, and just kind of hit a wall. I think it was like July 4th or like that weekend. So I went back to my friend that originally let me live with him. He took me to a psych ward, and then I get out, and then I walk to his house, and he's like, "Well, you can't stay here." So I don't know. So then I call my dad, and my dad was a heroin addict in Florida. So I hadn't talked to him in a long time, but he was like, "Hey, I'm actually like 4 months sober. I'm at the sober living." He's like, "I'll get you a Greyhound ticket. You come to Florida, you can move into the sober living." So I that's what I did. So I go to Florida. I go into the sober living. I see that my dad's staying sober. My dad like has a sponsor and shit, and like he's doing the steps. And I'm not really convinced that I need to do all of that, but I'm like, it would be good to take a break from drugs. And I lived there for like 3 months, and then I save up like $1,200, and because I actually got a job at a pawn shop, ironically, in Florida, and I save up like $1,200, and then I have a friend in New York City, and I'm basically telling him I'm going to buy a Greyhound ticket and go to New York City, and like move in with you until I can get on my feet. So I did that, and immediately he relapses on heroin, and we both just start doing heroin. I live in New York for like a year just doing heroin, and kind of like couch surfing, homeless part of the time. Sometimes I got a job eventually. I got a little $600 room, and
what brought you to what was the appeal of New York? Because like you grew up in Boston, you lived in San Fran, you lived in LA for a minute, like, and then you were in Florida. So what was like, I'm gonna go to New York now, where it's way more expensive to live in Florida?
Yeah. Well, I had a friend there, and I was kind of like, New York is where the dreams happen. I was like, I'll go there and like get a white collar job and just get my shit together, because that's like, I don't know, that's what I pictured New York as. Like, you just go and you get like a stockbroker job immediately and just become rich, or and that did not happen. I became a dishwasher, and I washed dishes, and I don't know, it was exciting. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to move to New York. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and I love New York City. I grew up outside of Philly, so it was only like an hour and a half bus ride to New York, and it's one of those cities where you walk around and like it doesn't tire you out. You could walk around for days and see new shit. So it's a lot easier to be homeless in New York, except for the winters, I'm sure. But you were just couch surfing and working as a dishwasher.
Yeah, and then they also have a lot of shelters in New York City. So I stayed at the shelter on 30th and First Ave, and because I think because of the weather, they like sort of are required to provide shelter space, and so I stayed at the shelter for a while, and it was cool, man. I had a good time, but my friend eventually was like, "I'm leaving. Like, I want to get off heroin," and he had like a support system and like a family and stuff, so he like moved back to Oakland, and then I just took a Greyhound back to Florida and moved back to that sober living, and did the same thing basically.
Again?
I did what?
Did you kick in New York and then go to Florida, or go to Florida and kick?
No, I went to Florida and brought like 6 Suboxone, and basically went to Florida, moved into the sober living, and sort of like, I'm pretty good at like getting off of heroin. Like I'm good with Suboxone. I know like
we have subs. I mean, like I knew people that were getting scripts of subs and then turn around and sell them for $10-$20 a piece.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean, and then support their pill habit. But like I always would buy subs and keep track. But I did that once too, where I got clean and I brought 5 Suboxone with me, and they were like the old school you know what I mean, the octagon ones.
Yeah.
And I would break them into pieces. And it's crazy that people can be prescribed Suboxone so easily still to this day, and think that people need an entire one every day. Like, people only need an eighth of one to not feel sick. It's the more of it, you're just getting high on it. Like, I don't understand why it's prescribed for long-term use. It should only be prescribed to kick and then cut it off. Like,
Yeah.
I never understood, like, and I got sober that time because of the 5 Suboxone I had. I would need like a quarter the first day, and then the second and third, but by the time you get to like the end, you're like, oh, I'm feeling better now.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think with 5 Suboxone you can kick heroin.
Yeah.
I think anything more is like you're flirting with like getting addicted to Suboxone, and Suboxone is not easy to kick. Once you're addicted to Suboxone, so.
Oh,
Yeah.
I went to rehab with a girl who was there because she got sober a year before, and then she was addicted to the Suboxone, and she couldn't come off it safely, so she went to rehab while she came down from the Suboxone.
Yeah, because they're giving 16 milligrams a day to people,
which is wild.
Yeah.
It's absolutely wild. I mean, the old school ones were what, 8 milligrams?
Yeah, so they
Yeah.
give 2 of them. My friend was prescribed 2 of them. So he gave me 5, but he got prescribed 2 a day, and he was just on it for like 10. So that was like 2014. Like he just got off of them from that time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where people are like, well, at least they're not shooting dope. It's like, yeah, but still.
Yeah. Well, it's like him. Like he was on them for like 9 years, and then was abusing them the whole time and like running out of them, and then like having to buy more on Craigslist. And basically after 9 years, eventually bought some on Craigslist from a guy that was like, I also have this, I also have that, and then like relapsed really badly.
Yeah.
On like Xanax and meth and all this shit. And so it was like this ticking time bomb sort of, but then he went to rehab and now he's just off everything.
Yeah. Now, so you go back to Florida, and now do you have a relationship with your dad? Because like you're 12 years old and you get shipped across the country, your dad's on heroin, and now you're like 24, 25, and you first like meet with your dad as an adult, like, and you're an adult. So like you haven't seen him in like half your life, and now you both are just trying to get sober together.
Yeah, we have this kind of like awkward relationship, but it builds into something, and now we have a very close relationship. But yeah, it was very weird at first, and because it was like the pause button was hit for 10 years, and all of a sudden I'm back, and we're both like fucked up. But as he stayed sober, we developed a closer relationship. And then eventually, once I got sober, our relationship sort of took off, and I actually go see him a lot. He's still in Florida. I was just there like last week. So I try to see him every like 2 months.
That's awesome that you can have that kind of, because like it definitely should be awkward at first if you get just jump in there, because like you haven't seen him since you were a kid, 12 years old. I mean, like we said earlier, that's a pivotal part in your life. And then to have both your parents go, and then did you like find, you were like 14 when your mom passed, you said, was that from heroin?
It was, yeah.
And it still didn't stop you from eventually doing it. So now you get, obviously you jumped around rehabs and you jumped around sober livings. How long did you last with your dad this time around before? Because like you had been gone for a year just getting high.
Yeah.
So you go back, because your dad have a year and a half, and then you're back with a clean slate.
Yeah, so like I last like 9 months, but I'm like doing weird shit, and like I'm doing like kratom and shit, and like I'm just not really taking it that seriously. And then I that time I save up like $3,000, so I have like some money, and I decided to move back to California. And I basically drive across the country, and as I'm passing through, I was actually moving to Oakland, but you have to drive through LA to get to Oakland, and I end up on Skid Row, get high, end up in the hospital, all this shit, and then I end up I don't know. I actually end up getting to Oakland, but pretty quickly I come back down to LA and end up on Skid Row again for about a year. I'm on Skid Row.
No, were you doing the same hustle of Union Station?
No, it didn't work that time, because I looked a little bit older and I looked a little bit more fucked up. And
you were a little weathered.
And I was smoking a lot of crack, and like that makes no one like trusts a crackhead. I don't know.
That'll do it.
Yeah, it just didn't work that time. So that's when I got into like professional shoplifting and was like just professionally stealing certain items for fences that were requesting like shopping lists. And I made a lot of money. I probably made like $300 a day. And but I was smoking crack. So crack is very expensive. It's actually very cheap, but you just do so much of it that it ends up being very expensive.
An expensive habit.
Yeah. So I'm doing heroin and crack basically, and I do that for about a year. It's rough. I mean, it gets that's just my bottom point. You know, at the end of that year, and fortunately, I'm basically praying for death or like send me to prison because I kept going to jail, but for like 2 days.
Yeah.
And then getting out and then getting high. Because I had this thing where I could just walk into a store and immediately steal stuff and make a ton of money. It was like a curse. I knew how to make money. Now that's different. They're obviously like locking things up a little bit more. But I was so like pissed that I had this ability just to get high anytime I wanted. So very fortunately, this odd thing occurred where I got mugged in a Panda Express while I was on my phone, and I pulled out a knife to ask the guy for my phone back. And it was actually the food court of the library. It was a Panda Express in the food court. They had a big library, and so there was like security, and so they handcuffed us both. The police came, they looked at the cameras, and they arrested me because you can't pull a knife on somebody even if they attack you. In California, it's illegal. I didn't know that, so they arrested me for assault with a deadly weapon, and I went to jail and actually had to fight. I fought a prison sentence for 6 months, and my charges were dropped. They realized that this was kind of a dumb charge, but it took a while, and I actually got a 6-month violation. It got dropped after a couple of months, but they gave me a 6-month violation for just contact with the police. And that was like the perfect amount of time. Like, so I kicked heroin cold turkey in jail, and was very grateful. I had a great time in jail. I was so happy to be off Skid Row, and
you get 3 meals a day. You get a bed. You get a cot to sleep on instead of the concrete. You're living large.
Yeah, you get books. Like, I love reading books, so I got all these books, and then you have like friends. You're like in, it's honestly, I had a really fun time, and then as I was approaching that 6 months, I was getting really scared, and I didn't want them to let me go, because I had nowhere to go. I was like, I'm just going to go back to Skid Row. So, of course they let me out, and I do go to Skid Row, and I get high, and it's just not the same. I don't know. Something was just different, and I was like, you know what, fuck this. And then, I mean,
there's plenty of homeless in LA, but there's also plenty of rehabs in LA.
There's a lot of rehabs. And listen, I didn't have health insurance. If you have health insurance, rehabs will be lining up to take you. I didn't have health insurance, but there are a number of like nonprofit rehabs that don't require health insurance.
Like the Salvation Army, right?
Yeah, places like the Salvation Army, and then there's a few others in Los Angeles that are, like Cry Help, Claire Foundation, Tarzana, Impact, American Recovery Center. I think that's it.
I know the Claire. I used to I got sober in LA.
Oh,
I never been there, and I heard of this place called High Sobriety, and I heard about it in like a documentary, and it was a sober living that let you use cannabis. Okay. And so I was sitting there like high as shit. I'm like, well, for the first time in a decade, I'm like, well, that's a place I would go.
Yeah.
And the next day I had like the worst day, sitting in a McDonald's parking lot for 4 hours. Just, it's one of those days. Yeah. And you can't find anything, and it's hurting. And finally I got some. I drove 2 hours to get what I needed to do. Yeah. And just sit there for 5 hours. Then I finally bought 3, which is like nothing on Perk 30, like Oxy 30s. And I got 3, and I did 2 right away because I was hurting so bad. And I'm driving back with 1, and I'm like, what the fuck? And so I Googled it as I was driving, and because it was a 2-hour car ride back. And I talked to this dude, Justin, and he talked to me for an hour. And he was like, come out here. you're going to go to inpatient for 30 days, and then you can begin the sober living. And you can't smoke or anything like that. You just use the edibles to help you fall asleep, or like the tincture. And I'm like, okay, well, and that worked. I mean, I haven't done pills in 5 years. Now my sober date, because I went back to drinking, I'll have 4 years on the 29th of February. So
Okay.
it'll be the first time that I can actually celebrate my anniversary, because, or as you call them in LA, birthdays.
Yeah.
But like I got sober on Leap Day, so
really?
I couldn't. And my wife's had the same sober date, but I couldn't, like, now I'm like, I don't want to fuck this up. It's the perfect sober date. Like, I only get one every 4 years. Like, this is an awesome, like, the breaking the ice kind of fun fact. Like, oh, my sober date's a Leap Day.
Yeah. I've never met someone like that. Yeah, that's cool.
That's what I
A lot
mean.
of people have like January 3rd.
Yeah, yeah, because it's 2 days after New Year's, and you're like, nope, I'm done with this. It's a new year. I gotta quit. And
Yeah.
so
I haven't heard of that.
no, what made you go down? Because now you're sober. You said 5 years.
Yeah.
And now you're in Austin.
Yeah, I live in Austin now.
What do you do?
I did work in visual effects, but the writer's strike kind of like laid off the whole industry, sort of. So I'm actually unemployed.
Oh,
but
okay.
The strike just ended, so I think I'll be fine.
And you're going back to Oakland?
Yeah, I'm actually going back to Oakland because I'm taking a job with like a journalism job. So like there's a lot of shit going on in Oakland and San Francisco right now, and I write sometimes for like the New York Post and other things, and I got offered like a position with Michael Schellenberger to like just cover Oakland and San Francisco related news, and I'm from there kind of, so I
Well, you grew up there. I would consider that growing up there.
No, I know, but I guess I lived there for like 6 years or something during my teens, and so I said, "Fuck it, I'm gonna go." I don't have a job. There could be some big opportunity, or just maybe this is my calling. I don't know, but because I think things are really gonna flip there really soon, where it's like they're like, "Hey, we need to really help these homeless drug addicts, and like not just let them do drugs, but like maybe start building the infrastructure for public treatment centers or job training facilities and stuff like that." And I just think there's going to be a lot of openings there to actually help people in the next year or two, because they're doing a hard 180, it seems, on a lot of things. Because their policy, I think they had good intentions, but it's just not working, so I think that's where I'm supposed to go. So I'm going to go.
Go back where it all started.
Yeah, because that seems to be like there's like a powder keg going off there right now, which is like, what do we do? Like, how do we handle this epidemic of the fentanyl overdoses? And
yeah, and you seem like the kind that can blend in well.
Yeah, well, like I look a certain way where I can blend in with like normal people, but if you talk to me, you can tell I'm not lying. I can tell you specifics about Skid Row and the Tenderloin, and people will trust me. People do trust me at some point. And because I've told a lot of people that I was on Skid Row, and people question it. They're like, I don't know if I believe that. And then we start talking in detail, and then people are like, all right, this guy either studied Skid Row or he lived there, so.
When I moved into sober living, I become friends fast with like the people that are like the managers. They would like take us to meetings and shit, and make sure we were at IOP every day on time, and make sure we were just like, they weren't living managers, but they were there every day.
Yeah.
And the one dude's my age, and he was actually on my show. He was my last episode that I did. And we would go to meetings all over LA. Like every Saturday we went to the Comedy Store.
Oh yeah.
That was a great meeting because you see a bunch of people who were trying to make it, and you know what I mean, but they're funny. So when they're telling stories, they know how to make you laugh because they're good storytellers.
Yeah.
And we would go to the Comedy Store every Saturday at noon, and then we would like find something like to eat. And then the one day we took the inpatient, because he worked at the inpatient house too, and we took them to a meeting, and we were like, we're going down to Skid Row, and we're going to find a meeting right around Skid Row. But it was like in a park. It was a meeting in a park in Skid Row. but it had closed due to like some renovations.
Yeah,
And
I know that part. There's like a fence around it, kind of like a permanent fence around it. Yeah, yeah.
And they were trying to like fix the park, so it was shut down in the meantime.
Yeah.
Because you were probably running around like sober. Because what is it? August of 2018.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got clean right as I left. Because
Yeah.
I got there in April 2018, and I left like August 3rd of 2018. So
Okay.
you were probably on Skid Row when we drove that that we call them the druggy buggy.
Yeah.
We took them through Skid Row. So you were probably on Skid Row right before when we were driving through.
Yeah. There's a chance. I mean, I did like, so I went to that nonprofit rehab in like 2017 or something, and I stayed sober for like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 months or something, and then the toe thing happened, and then I went back. So I might have like been in my little period of like where I was sober while you were down there, but I was going to meetings. Like we might have seen each other at meetings. I used to go to like Third and Gardner in Hollywood, West Hollywood.
My first time ever speaking at a meeting was 30 Days Sober at the North Hollywood Midnight Meeting.
Okay, I got sober in North Hollywood.
So that it was a Thursday night midnight meeting,
Okay.
and the dude that like he would take me to meetings, he lived in Hollywood. He
Okay.
was like, "Hey, I'm a secretary at this meeting, and we'd like newbies to speak. Since you got 30 days, how about I take you to this meeting, and I'll talk to the management for you to break curfew to be at this meeting." And I said, "If you can get them to let me go, then yeah, I'll go."
Yeah.
I left an NA meeting in Santa Monica, on Kensington. What the hell's the name of that place? Ashland Park,
Okay.
or something like that. But I took an Uber from there to Hollywood and he gave me a ride back because I was living in what the hell is that called? It's I'm blanking on the name now. It's been so long. Shit. We're by LAX.
Culver City.
Culver City, thank you. Yeah. Yep. So that's where my rehab was. So we would go to Santa Monica, we would go to all those places on the west side, and
Marina
20 Broad, Marina Center.
Yeah, Marina Center.
I used to go to Marina Center every day at noon.
Yeah, that's a great place. I was going to Hollywood late night every night until COVID hit, and then I it kind of shut down. But yeah, Hollywood late night was the craziest meetings I've ever been to.
Yep. And when I was like 2 months sober, or maybe 45 days sober, they let me break curfew every night to go to the midnight meeting in Marina.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would go there at 11 o'clock every night and hear some of the craziest stories, the craziest crosstalk, like, you know what I mean? And it was one of those things that like you're only going to see Marina Center in North Hollywood. Like some of the midnight meetings are always the craziest, and they're not like known, because when I came back and tried starting my own meetings, because that's what I did for, like, this is called MJ's, but my name is JD. And the only reason it's MJ's is because my wife and I owned a nonprofit called MJ's Progress Not Perfection.
Yeah.
And we held meetings in town for people that are NA, AA, and I was trying to make the Marina Center and mixed with the West Hollywood Recovery Center. I'm not sure if you've ever been to that West Hollywood Recovery Center.
Yeah.
They had meetings all day long, just different kinds of meetings, whether it was NA. I went to one meeting for Marijuana Anonymous, like an MA meeting. They have like some different like style of meeting.
No, Santa Monica and like Gower.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where it is?
Probably. It was one of those nights where that dude Matt that I was talking about took me, like, he would find me random meetings. It was the same. I went to a meeting every Tuesday night called See You Next Tuesday, which I thought was a brilliant name for a meeting. So I would go to that meeting every Tuesday, and apparently it was Demi Lovato's home group. And then
that's what's crazy about AA in LA is like, you become friends with like celebrities and stuff. I mean,
especially in rehab, there's a dude that was like not a Bollywood actor, but he was like known for being in India for being this singer that sung, and he made a ton of money and had a ton of money, but he was in rehab with me, and
Yeah.
he took a big adjustment to having people do shit for him. And then to having, because you know how rehab is, like they try to teach you how to be a human again, make your bed, get a shower every day, do your laundry, all the basic things that you forget to do when you're a drug addict. Like you said, like you weren't showering for days, you had mangled feet, and you wore socks and all that shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I forget his name to this day, which I'm kind of glad. But like, he was a big dick because he just wouldn't do shit. He wouldn't unload the dishes. He wouldn't do his chores because he didn't feel like he needed to because he was paying cash. You know, all this, and of course, he's one of the first ones to drink again. And like, alcohol was his drug of choice. And being into sober living, he started drinking again. Like it was his birthday, and everyone knew he was going out drinking, and he got caught and got kicked out and they tried sending him back to the rehab because you know in sober livings they're always affiliated with an inpatient. So when you get kicked out, they give you the option: do you want to go back or do you want to go somewhere else? And people either go back. I knew a girl that went back to inpatient like 3 times in 45 days. Like it's wild out there.
Yeah. Well, no, the key is like humility, and that's, like Robert Downey Jr., famously like didn't have a lot of celebrity privilege going on when he probably got off a few times at the beginning, but they really started nailing him, and he went to prison for like 12 months and had to go to he got court ordered to some like drug court, quote unquote shitty rehab, and he got sober.
It takes what it takes. I mean, everybody's got something different. I mean, losing a toe would definitely do that for me too.
Yeah. But I just saw it as like a funny body part to lose, but the next one wasn't going to be funny.
Yeah, you got lucky. You almost lost your face. I mean, you've been through the ringer, and now you got 5. I mean, who would have thought someone who lives on Skid Row and just like you weren't an addict that didn't know how to survive. Like most addicts, they know how to keep themselves going. And that's why I asked you, like, what did you do? Because everyone has a hustle, whether you're a sex worker, whether you're good at stealing, everyone's got this way of hustling about them that keeps them addicted for longer because you keep tricking yourself. Like, I can keep doing this. Look at my life. Like, it's not in that much of shambles, even though it's to anybody else, it's completely unhinged.
Yeah. No, every drug addict has to figure out how to support their drug habit, and if they can't, they usually don't stay a drug addict. I mean, being a drug addict requires a lot of money.
And it requires a lot of time. And it takes a lot of dedication. Like people that get sober, you start wondering, like, how did I afford that every single day now that I have real bills? You know what I mean? It's one of the things of becoming a human again.
Shane Gillis has a bit from his first stand-up special where it's like he's talking. His sister was a heroin addict, and she's like, it's like waking up in like a video game where you have to do like missions like Zelda like every day, and the missions get darker and darker as more time passes. And
he was like, yeah. And when we were going to do an intervention, I took her to the amusement park that day because I didn't want her to think we were tricking her. So the worst thing to do on an intervention is take her have the best day of her life. She was going down those water slides with his Steelers pants on and his Steelers jersey. Shane Gillis is hilarious, man. Like I started doing comedy in Central PA, and my first time performing was in Philly at the Helium. And then I got like bitten by the bug of doing stand up. So I would go to like Chinatown in Philly on Sundays, and I would go to this place where I was living in Central PA called the Comedy Zone, and it's in Harrisburg. And Shane Gillis grew up like 10 minutes, but he got started in Philly already. Like he didn't start it in the same place that I started, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he like was from Mechanicsburg or something.
Mechanicsburg, it's about 10 miles outside of Harrisburg.
Yeah, well, he nailed it. I mean, he nailed heroin addiction with that, and made it very funny. Obviously, he's a
funny guy.
Number one guy right now, I think.
I think he's hilarious. Like every time they do the save, you watch Rogan. Whenever he's on Rogan, he's hilarious the entire time. I mean, his bit about the dogs and cats are like people with autism and people with Downs.
Yeah.
It was the perfect way. And like I grew up with somebody who was like, I'm used to seeing that, but he encapsulated it so perfect when he was like saying, like, and the dog comes like, oh, what you do today? You want to see my new trick? Like, do you want to see this, or do you want to see like?
It was genius, and I've been listening to his podcast since like 2020.
Shane and Matt.
Yeah, so like I'm just really happy. Like because I was there, I was like listening to it when he was going through all that shit, and it's just cool to like watch someone rise like that.
The SNL shit, and that people that don't, because he was hired on SNL for famously only one day, because it took them one day of research to find that podcast from like 2012.
Yeah.
Where he did like an offensive voice. It's like that was a long ass time ago.
Yeah.
Like,
but he's so funny that they can't say no. Like he has a Netflix special.
But his sketches are hilarious. Like whenever they did the Gilly and Shane, like that shit was hilarious.
Yeah.
But I'll let you go. But I'm glad you came on the show. I'm glad I finally heard your story, because I heard like a part of it at one point, and that's how I started following you. Was you were on another podcast, and you said you were talking about one of your stories. I'm like, now this dude I want to have on my show, because I want to hear more of those stories. So I appreciate you coming on being so candid, because I know it's not easy sometimes to like run back the reel and talk about shit, but it is therapeutic. It is a good way to like have your recoveries, to talk about it and get more people to like have more aware, be more conscious of it. Like you said, like you shouldn't do. It shouldn't be as accepted as it is where you're going.
Yeah. Well, listen, I really appreciate the opportunity, JD, and I agree. Like, I like talking about it. I think it is therapeutic. I think it's funny. I think a lot of that shit's funny, and I think a lot of it is like, it's a defense. It's a defense against relapse, because just re-going over all the shit that I did, and hopefully people can be inspired, and you don't have to lose a toe. You don't have to lose a toe.
Yeah, you don't have to lose half your face. I mean, what it takes.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, but it was nice chatting with you.
Yeah, great chat. Thank you.